Now I keep my phone on do not disturb almost all day, every day. But when I didn't, anytime the phone would ring or ding or go off, it was an invitation for me to take one deep, joyful, mindful breath. When I say mindful, I really mean mindless.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kien Vuu, aka Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I actually release an episode that we had in the Thrive State Summit. This is where I've interviewed over 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental health and emotional wellness. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Not only have I've gone through my versions of low mood, anxiety, deep depression, but so is our guest, to the point of even suicide. And if you've ever had those thoughts yourself, or if you have a family member or know of anyone who's ever had these thoughts, this is going to be a very eye-opening conversation that you would want to listen to. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to get access to the full summit, go to mythrivestate.com/pro. That's where you'll find all the digital resources we have here in the Thrive State community, including the Thrive State Summit, where you get access to thought leaders like Vishen Lakhiani, Bruce Lipton, Dave Asprey, William Lee, Dr. Stephen Gundry, and so many more. Access the full summit at mythrivestate.com/pro. On today's episode, I sit down with happiness and mental health expert Rob Mack to discuss his deeply personal journey of overcoming suicidal thoughts and finding inner peace. He candidly shares his own experience on depression and suicidal ideation and the surprising moment of clarity that led him to postpone his suicidal attempt. He dives into the root causes of unhappiness, including the role of overthinking, obsessive thought patterns, and the transformative process of getting quiet. Not only that, he offers practical tools and resources for anyone who happens to have these thoughts to move forward. So again, if you or anyone in your life has dealt with depression or suicidal thoughts, you want to listen to this very important conversation, please enjoy this episode of the Thrive State Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another session of the Thrive State Summit. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And with me today, good friend and brother, vibing with happy energy, Rob Mack. He's an Ivy League educated positive psychology expert, celebrity happiness coach, published author, television host, and producer. His work has been endorsed by Oprah, Vanessa Williams, Lisa Nichols, and many others. In addition to serving as a celebrity love coach for Famously Single on E! Network for 2 seasons, he's also worked as consulting producer, on-camera expert for Mind Your Own Business on the Oprah Winfrey Network, and executive producer and co-host of the Good Morning Land on Apple TV and Hulu. He's been featured on television shows such as Good Morning America, The Today Show, CBS Morning Show, and Access Hollywood, where both of us know Mario Lopez. And his first book, Happiness from the Inside Out, is a celebrity-endorsed and critically acclaimed book. His most recent release, you guys have to pick up, Love from the Inside Out, Lessons and Inspiration for Loving Yourself, Your Life, and Each Other. I can't wait to dive in. Thanks for being with us, Rob.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the intro. I got to come back here more often just to get the ego stroke.
My friend, we're going to be talking about a difficult topic. And I know many people with mental health struggles who are coming into the summit now might have to deal or have dealt with either themselves or the people that they love with the idea of suicide. And so if somebody's severely depressed or who has suicidal thoughts right now, what's most important to know?
I would say, first and foremost, seek out professional help. There are people who have dedicated their entire lives. They've invested blood, sweat, and tears, literally, to helping folks who are struggling with depression and suicidal ideation. And I'm one of those people, and there are lots and lots of people out there in the world. So I'd say reach out for professional help. If you are seriously considering suicide, call 988, and you can always connect with somebody live right away. I think that's probably the most important thing you possibly know right at the top, is that there are professionals that are committed to helping you turn your life around and feel a lot better.
Thank you so much for those resources. You've become an expert in this, and it's been your life's work only because you had a process in the past. Consider taking your own life. Can you walk us through that process and what that looked like? Because it seemed like from the outside, you've lived the life that most people should be happy of, but you weren't feeling that inside.
No, you nailed it. Yeah, I appreciate you so much, Dr. B, man. Yeah, my earliest memories in life are just of being depressed and anxious and stressed out and just hating myself. At 6 or 7 years of age, I remember that. And I always hoped and wanted to grow out of it. And I thought, oh, I'll eventually maybe have some friends and maybe I'll be the professional basketball player I wanted to be. Maybe I'll have a girlfriend at some point and have some money. And I always thought that as I got older and I accomplished things or achieved things or acquired things, that my life would change and I would feel better. But that's not what happened, at least not right away. As I did pretty well in school, I was salutatorian in my high school class. I did well in sports, basketball and baseball and football and cross country. And I went and on to college and got a college scholarship, went on to work for a big five management consulting company. Despite all of that, even having a girlfriend at some point, just felt worse and worse subjectively on the inside, despite my life going better and better objectively on the outside. And I got to a place where I decided I was going to do some research and I was going to kill myself. And the research that I did was really about how to do that. You know, I
Mm,
didn't want it to be a big deal. I just wanted it to end. And I didn't have access to a lot of means, but I did have access to knives. So I just went to the kitchen, got a steak knife, and I dug it into my wrist. And I still have the test marks in my wrist to this day.
mm,
But the most surprising and unexpected thing happened as I dug that knife into my wrist. And that is without anything externally changing my life at all. I had a pretty good life. And that almost made it worse because I felt guilty for not being more grateful.
mm,
As I dug that knife in, I felt all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this peace and love and joy that I had never experienced before. And it washed over me in a way that was palpable and visceral, and I'll remember forever.
mm.
And so at that point, I decided I was going to postpone the suicide. It was like, I can always do the suicide thing in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour or 10 days. And surprising things started happening right away. First thing is I started doing a different kind of research. I looked up what is depression, what really is suicidal ideation, what really is happiness. And I discovered there were lots of people in the world that had solved this problem for themselves and for other people who knew a whole heck of a lot more about it all than I did. And so I just made a study of that and those people. And I won't lie to you and say that every day was better. Some days felt worse. It was sometimes like 2 steps forward and 1,000 backwards. But
Mm.
I look back now and over 2 decades later, and I'm blown away by how much progress a single person can make when they lean on the right resources and they connect with the right people, or they just have a deep desire to turn their lives around and mostly to feel better.
Mm. That's so beautiful, and thank you for the work that you do. What would you say potentially was the root cause of that depression and the suicidal ideation for you?
Oh man, such great questions, man. That is also taking me probably about 20 years to really get my head around. At first, I would have said things like, which were true, which was like perfectionism and existential angst and existential anxiety, meaning I didn't know what the purpose of my life was. And I didn't know the purpose of life in general was. And I'd still they say that's true. Underneath all of that, though, was an obsessive compulsive habit, need, desire to think. Like I couldn't turn it off.
Mm.
I've discovered that discursive thought, that self rumination that just causes your mind to spin out over and over again in increasingly unproductive and unprofitable and unhappy ways was the very root, the very core, the very essence of that unhappiness. And that without that, without an unhappy story that you play over and over again in your head, you're happy already. So it was overthinking ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. We talk about with many of the guests here, the default mode network and all these programs that have been put in our brains, sometimes causing us not to be able to live and express our authentic selves with the world. And that causes a lot of angst.
I just love the way you put that. Of course, you would put it so beautifully and eloquently. That's exactly right, 100%. And at first, I thought it was about reprogramming
Mm.
and reconditioning my mind. It could be partly that. In other words, the first part of my journey was really learning to think in more supportive, constructive, healthy and happy ways. Absolutely. It was extraordinarily helpful. Thank God. But I also discovered that even as I thought more positively and constructively and happily and peacefully and lovingly and self-lovingly, I still felt this like anxiety underneath. And I never really felt the kind of peace and fulfillment that I ultimately desired and feel that we all deserve. And it
Mm.
was only when I began to quiet my mind that that authentic self that you spoke to and spiritual language, talk about the Buddha mind, the Christ consciousness, that began to express itself, or I should say, I removed the veil on that. And so the happiness and the peace and the love that's inherent, innate, and intrinsic to us all began to shine through.
Mm. Ooh, I'm getting some goosebumps in this conversation. What do you think, or how would you explain what you felt when you placed that knife to your wrist?
Relief. Oh, just relief. And again, it took me a long time to appreciate that when I dug that knife in, the reason I felt the relief was that for the first time in my life, my mind was quiet and I was aware that it was quiet. I'm sure periods of time needed to be quiet before, but I was never aware that it was quiet. In the contemplation of the ending or the resolution of all my problems, which I thought was suicide, I
Mm.
came to the end of thinking. When I came to the end of thinking, I came to the end of my suffering. When I come to the end of my suffering, I came to the end of my unhappiness. And yes, it was relief. And that relief was always there under the surface, just like the sun is always there in the sky. But sometimes the clouds can literally cloud your experience or your view of the sunshine behind it. In the same way, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, perceptions, and experiences sometimes seem to cloud this eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, the quiet.
Mm. Some people hear that meditation is a very powerful tool, but they hear people meditating for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. We had Kyle Cease talk about him meditating for 4 hours the other day. And for some people whose mind is constantly chattering, that might feel a little overwhelming. So do you have any tips and tricks as to how to start practicing the quieting of the mind?
Yeah. So talk about those shivers. I get those shivers every time I connect with you, doctor. Every time, man. Every time. And it's this entire conversation. I'm in Miami. It's hot here. So for me to have those chill bumps is profound. It's a soul connection. Yes, absolutely. I would say my first meditation experience was horrifying. I
Mm.
thought I was having a panic attack. I was in a room full of really like it felt like 30 female expert meditators, and they were so good at it. I was already so intimidated because I felt, "What am I doing in this room? I shouldn't be in this room." And then it just didn't go well for me. I just felt like I was spiraling and spinning out of control. So what I've discovered is a few things. One is I wasn't that good at it. Nobody ever feels good at meditation. Second, I'm lazy, man. I'm really lazy, and I'm also impatient. So I want my happiness, and I want my peace, and I want it now, like right now. I don't want to wait till tomorrow. I don't
Give me
wanna
a
wait
pills.
exactly, dude, 100%. So I love what I call micro meditation.
Mm.
Micro meditations are one breath. It's one breath. It's one moment. And this is easy for folks who have been depressed or aware of their own mortality from a physical perspective, or have contemplated suicide because you're aware that any moment your life could be over. Right? So what I've discovered is because my mind would return there all the time anyway, I remind myself that life is very long on one hand if you're unhappy. It's very short on the other. And hopefully we all have 100 more years left in these beautiful human flesh costumes. But maybe we also only have a day, an hour, 5 minutes, 5 seconds. And so I want to treat this moment right here and now like it's the most important moment of my life because it is. It's the only moment that any of us actually has access to. Literally. Okay. Not figuratively, literally. So the idea is to remind yourself of that and then to try to enjoy one breath and only one breath as deeply, as fully, as intentionally, and as consciously as you possibly can. So the idea is to be selfish, to be lazy, and to be as hedonistic as humanly possible in this moment. And you can do that best by breathing in through your nose, out of the mouth, breathe from the stomach. You let all your thoughts go. You forget the world. You forget everybody and everything in the world. You forget yourself. For one moment, you're trying to juice or milk this one breath, this one moment for as much joy, as much pleasure as you can possibly get out of it. Now, the trick is if you try to get good at it, you'll suck at it forever and you won't enjoy it, right? So don't try to get good at it, man. That's the right. So instead, try to enjoy it as much as humanly possible. Then you'll not only enjoy it, you'll get really good at it really fast. And so the idea is to practice that micro meditation as often as you can throughout the day, no matter what else you're doing. You don't even have to even stop what you're doing. You can keep doing whatever it is, driving or listening to someone or walking, but try to juice or milk that one moment, that one breath for as much joy as you can possibly get out of it.
So good. I like to have cues sometimes to form habits around it. And I have people like use every time they walk through a doorway or something like that to choose the intention and to feel that so that you could energetically do that. Do you have little tiny cues for yourself to remind you to do your micro meditations?
You might be a brother from another mother. Because literally, that's one of mine I use as well. I used to use the hallway thing. Hallways or doors. Anytime I go in or out of a door through a hallway. Also, I discovered I needed to use it. Now I keep my phone on do not disturb almost all day, every day. But when I didn't, anytime the phone would ring or ding or go off, it was an invitation for me to take one deep, joyful, mindful breath. When I say mindful, I really mean mindless, but it's this, right? So that worked, all of those worked as cues for me. I love that. Those if then statements like, if this happens, then I'll do that. It's extraordinarily helpful. It works like a mindfulness spell.
All right. Now I want more. What else you got?
That's one of my great, if you want to take that practice deeper,
Yeah.
you can practice something I call practicing the presence.
Mm.
So when we use the breath as our focus, and even if you just do one breath and you practice the micro meditation, it's great and it's fantastic. And it really helps you to create a solid foundation for this next step. The next step is going beyond that to feel in to the life energy, life force, or peaceful aliveness that already exists within you, within your body. So you're feeling into that. Right now, you can feel it in your hands. You can feel it in your feet. You can feel it in your stomach. You can feel it everywhere, and so anywhere, at any point in time. The idea is to feel into that for joy's sake alone, for love's sake, or peace's sake alone. And you want to spend time, I'll say, with that. But that life force, that life energy is essentially what you are. You don't have a life. You are life, right? You have a life. You are life. You're that life force, that life energy. So when you feel into that, you're doing it just to enjoy it. And the beautiful thing about that practice, as opposed to the other one, is that sometimes when we focus on breath and we're doing a meditation, it can cause us to be, it can reinforce this idea that we are a body, that we don't have a body, but that we are a body. You have a body. You're not a body. You have one. Same way you have a mind, but you're not a mind. You don't have consciousness or awareness. You don't have life. You are life. You are conscious, are awareness. There's a lot of words, but the idea is to feel in and practice the presence, your own presence, the divine presence, you call it what you want. But the idea is when you feel into that, can you feel into that consistently, no matter what else you're doing, you will quickly discover that all kinds of things begin to happen on their own. So people you wouldn't otherwise meet, you begin to meet. Things that used to bother you don't bother you so much. Things you used to spend money on, you don't. Other things you spend a ton of money on, but it comes back. And life seems to improve for you. It seems to cooperate with you. And it's not happening because you're scripting it or thinking about it a whole lot or playing God. You are instead enjoying this presence, God, the divine. You can call it happiness, peace, love, whatever word you want that means to you perfect fulfillment and perfect success. Whatever that is, you feel into that in your body. And for me, that's my favorite practice of all. I just feel that way I don't think. Important thing is to not think. You just let your thoughts go. As the thoughts surface or arise, you just dismiss them or ignore them. It's something we do all day, every day. Anyway, if you notice, you have all kinds of wild, crazy thoughts go through your head, no matter who you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how rational or logical you are. You have irrational, illogical thoughts go through your mind all the time. And you just dismiss them. You ignore them. But there's some thoughts that we stick to or we begin to identify with or invest in. And we don't want to feed and fuel them. Instead, we want to dismiss and ignore them and feel back into the presence of life itself within you or practice that micro meditation.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Can you walk us through the journey or the couple of years it took to get there, letting people know what the slip ups are, to know what to expect in this process of quieting down the mind, because it's probably messy. And I think that's when people want to say, hey, this is not for me. I'm going to quit, or whatever it is. Can you walk us through that process?
Definitely. So if I had heard this conversation when I was at the beginning of my journey, like, this is nonsense, man. This is what a waste of time. It's not going to happen. Like, I thought I was the poster boy for overthinking, and that I could never quiet my. I thought that was an impossibility. And I thought that was something that people just talked about while they secretly continued thinking. In the beginning of my journey, all I really did was consume as much content on feeling better as possible. And mostly that was positive thinking stuff. Oh, it was so helpful. Also, it was so frustrating in the beginning. I remember getting so upset, like, the world is a messed up place. Bad things do happen. Horrible things are going on all the time. And I have a right to be upset about that, and worried about that, and concerned about that, or angry about that. And then the more content I consumed, the more I'd begin to hear other people's voices. In the beginning, it was Abraham Hicks, and it was Byron Katie, and it was Wayne Dyer and Ram Dass. But the idea in the very beginning was just, let me try to consume as much positive, inspiring, uplifting content as possible, because I need to drown out the noise and the dysfunctional thinking in my own head and brain. That was the only thing I really focused on. Okay. Most days it was frustrating. Some days it was very helpful, but I would play it even when I was sleeping. I would just try to play it all the time or read it all the time. I got to a place one day where, after several years, I discovered that, unlike the years before, I wasn't thinking about or contemplating suicide every day. I remember once going 3 days and not actually having thought about killing myself. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I thought I was making no progress, and look, I am. So then I began, or continued along that journey, and eventually I came to a recognition that I was still feeling anxious some days, and even unhappy, despite the most positive thoughts. And sometimes things seemed to still go wrong, despite the most positive thought. And that frustrated the heck out of me. And I thought I was doing it wrong. Like, I must be doing it wrong. I'm not thinking positively enough. And then I read and I studied more and more mystics and other spiritual teachers and other psychologists. And I discovered I wasn't doing anything wrong. There was just another step or another level. And that additional step or level was like, let me stop trying to control or force my mind to be positive all the time, and let me play with or experiment with this experience of dismissing and ignoring thoughts, especially if they were unhappy, conflict-ridden, or stressful. That took a few years as well, just to practice. I didn't really always practice it consistently. And then one day I had the experience of just going for a run. And I would call running and swimming and exercise moving meditations, really.
Yeah.
I mean, experienced a high. If you're an artist, sometimes you experience a high. Sometimes in the heat of passion, when you're in this incredible ecstatic moment, you're eating something really delicious. If you're observing beauty, a moment of awe or wonder, you notice that you feel real good, like you're in the flow state. And in the flow state, fascinating enough, it's another way of just describing no mind. This idea that you can quiet your mind, right? If there's a loss of time consciousness, a loss of self consciousness, and you're so deeply engaged, absorbed, and consumed with what you're doing, you don't have a whole lot of interest, time, energy, or bandwidth to evaluate how you're doing. And I discovered that anything and everything that allowed me to get or enter into a flow state was really just a state of no mind. It was another way of talking about it.
Yeah.
So that was a nice bridge. And I eventually got to a place where I was like, I can't run 24 hours a day. And even when I do run a lot, I still don't experience the high all the time. How can I get into that flow state, that state of absorption where I'm perfectly at peace and happy? And also, it's an alive peace, it's an alive happiness. How can I do that without exhausting my body or beating my body up all the time? And that's when I discovered meditation and then micro meditations and then practicing the presence. So now looking back, feels like a really long journey. And it was at the time, felt like a really long journey. But I also, the whole time, was trying to recreate the will. I never really found one teacher that I could lean on to describe all of this step by step. And I wasn't all that consistent sometimes. But in the end, I think I feel just deeply grateful to all the teachers because they led me to a place where, say, more than ever, I feel at peace.
Mm, so good. I know you get a chance to work with a lot of people that might have depression or suicidal thoughts. What should somebody know who might be listening to this that might have friends and family members who might be going through mental health crisis? How should we connect or communicate with them? What are the clues and signs, and how do we best support them?
Wow. So the first thing I'll say, or to the signs, everybody's going through something, you know, and it's important to know what the signs are, the symptoms are. That being said, be careful to not diagnose anyone. Even the best clinicians sometimes get it wrong. People are very good at masking. Okay. Also, people are also sometimes good at complaining a lot or talking about it a lot, but they don't really have the intention to do it. So it can freak you out on one hand, you can miss one on the other, and then you can judge yourself for it either way. So the most important piece I'll say around focus on non-judgment, both of the other and of yourself. There have been lots of studies done on the best forms of therapy, for instance. And they have found consistently that the form of therapy doesn't always matter. It's the therapist that matters. And it's one thing about the therapist that matters most: unconditional regard, the ability to hold space without judging, condemning, or criticizing, just listening and being innocently curious. That allows miracles to happen. It's healing and transformative and cathartic in a way that your words can never be. Stillness and silence speaks loudly, speaks powerfully. So listening without judgment, without condemnation, without criticism, number one, that goes for everybody in your life, period. You never know who might be depressed and suicidal, but just isn't showing all the symptoms and signs.
Yeah.
I would say that beyond that, you can look for a few things. First of all, if a person is making a plan for suicide, you want to take that seriously. If they're talking about suicide a lot, if they're not using the word suicide, but they're saying that they might want to end their lives, or they don't see the purpose or reason for existing, or they wish they had never been born, those are signs. And usually those signs, all of that is higher likelihood that they might be experiencing deep depression or suicidal ideation. If they also have lost interest in activities or hobbies that they normally had interest in, if they have trouble sleeping, or they sleep a lot. So folks that suddenly aren't sleeping a lot at all, or can barely sleep, or like insomnia, or sleeping all the time, wanting to sleep above all else. Also, fluctuations in mood. So you might see a lot of emotional dysregulation. In general, emotional dysregulation is one of the hallmarks of any kind of mental illness. So look for that. A lot of us think of people who are suicidal as being selfish, but I will tell you now that some of the most suicidal people, or people who have experienced suicidal experiences, or actually followed through with their suicidal plan, are some of the most unselfish, loving people in the entire world. And often they feel deeply that their life is a burden to other people, that their existence is a burden, that they're taking up space and taking up air and resources. It just goes back to that original point around judgment. Just be careful. I've heard lots of people say, they're so selfish to have killed themselves. So they're so selfish to even think about killing themselves. And I can guarantee you and promise you that when I was suicidal, I wanted to do it because I was convinced I was nothing but a burden and a pain, and my life wasn't worth living, and everybody's life around me would be better off as a result of that. Right. So those are a few of the signs and some of the recommendations for folks that might have someone in their lives who's suffering with either depression, or it could be anything, or suicidal ideation. If you feel that you need to take steps to intervene, great idea. Again, I would seek professional help so you can get and put together a plan. But part of that plan will be a contingency plan for safety plan for folks who might be suicidal. In those cases, they make sure they're removing sharp objects and medications and things like that that might cause people or might facilitate a suicidal experience. So anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Oh, there was so much. Do you still get triggered?
In general, in life,
Yes.
oh, absolutely. I think what's interesting is what I've discovered is I certainly feel all the emotions, right? I think we all feel all the emotions. And that being said, whereas before the emotions would be in the foreground of my experience, it'd be like center stage. Now it's softly in the background, and sometimes I don't notice it at all,
Hmm.
right? Whereas before it was in the foreground, it's moved to the background. Whereas before, this peaceful aliveness that used to be in the background has come to the foreground. I'll find myself certain things. If you see somebody that's suffering, you hear about somebody experiencing a loss, or you feel, or you even just be in session with somebody and they're sad, I'll feel that. But it doesn't take center stage anymore in a way that causes me to react or defend or explain or even dive in and save right away. Because that was also part of my thing. I'd get triggered and try to someone. And I realized that sometimes you can best help someone by not saving them in the way that you think you need to save them. So yeah, I still feel all the emotions. I'm not triggered anywhere close to the way I used to be. And if and when I do feel like a spike in my nervous system somewhere, it doesn't compel me to do anything about it. It's okay. If there's an emergency, sure. But in most cases, it's like somebody said something the other day that I thought was really insulting and offensive. And I remember just sitting there, oh, that's curious. That's interesting. I feel something inside me for sure. But just smile and it's like, okay. It's your response is changing though. And that doesn't mean that I can't get upset or mad or any of those things, but not like I was when I was 19, 20, 25. I mean, I was a temperamental hothead.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty amazing. What do those what does self-care look like to you now? And what are the sort of the practices that incorporate that are probably maybe if for somebody kind of starting their own path back, easy things that they can implement?
I would define self-care differently than I did years ago. I think self-care sometimes gets shortchanged a little. Sometimes when we think about self-care, we think about, and there's nothing wrong. In fact, please, all these things are fantastic and do them if you feel inspired. You get a manicure, pedicure, love that. Get a massage, love that. You sit down or lay down and watch a movie or TV show, all fantastic stuff. And when we talk about self-care, I think about self with a capital S. And that's the life that we all share, not the life circumstances and conditions, but whatever that energy or vibrating force is within you that also, by the way, hangs the earth on nothing. Like planet Earth just hangs on nothing. If you think about that, it rotates around, it rotates and it revolves around the super hot star. Like whatever infinite intelligence is up to all of that. I don't know what to call that. You can call it anything you want, but it's also in you and it's in me. And so I'd say that right there, recognizing that life force within you is everything. Oh, remember the question, I lost track a little there.
Oh yeah. What are the things that bring you that? Are there
Yep.
things that you do, and what do you and when you're helping others, how do you get the right methodology or the thing for them to try to be able to get to that state that you experience so much now?
Beautiful. So this piece around life, I would say life might be another word for self. And so it's life care. And so the idea there is just to strengthen whatever trust or faith you have in the universe, in life itself. That's probably number one, quite frankly. I don't know if anything's brought me more peace than that. Is that, okay? Strengthening you can call it spirituality, you can call it religion, you can call it simply letting go or living and let live. That's it, right? Just live and let.
Mhm.
Okay. Beyond that. So first thing in the morning, I practice the presence, which is mostly just quieting my mind, not thinking and just enjoying laying there and just being awesome. And then I read, big reader. I also go to the gym really early in the morning. First thing, I got to hit the weights. I do cardio. Love that so much. And I try to practice, although I don't always do it. The micro meditations when I'm lifting, not every set, fine. But so I'd say that. And then the other thing is I just like stillness and silence. I need some time to myself where I'm not thinking again. And I'm also not holding space for other folks because the emotional co-regulation can get a little exhausting. So those are things I love most. Also recently started getting some more massages and things of that nature. So I think it's a question of how do you most enjoy and when do you feel most and what energizes you most when you want to caretake your mind, your body, and your spirit or soul, right? So for me, the mind is reading mostly, it's having conversations like this. The soul for me is mostly, it might be prayer, it might be meditation, but it's certainly quieting the mind and just leading to the practice or practice the presence of the divine or the self or yours. And then the body is working out, stretching, and taking rest days.
Hmm. So beautiful. And I just love your energy. I love following you on Instagram and social media. Where do people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at my website at coachrobmack.com. You can find me on social media. Dr. P shouted out at Rob Mack, MACK official, probably most consistently on Instagram, but also Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can find both published books, Happiness from the Inside Out, Love from the Inside Out, everywhere great books are sold, including Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And also, Dr. B, I have to tell you, man, I appreciate you so much. Every time I connect with you and this, I genuinely feel better, not as not only as a person, but just as a being. Just feel better. So thank you so much for that. You enriched my life in ways that you're, I'm sure, aware of on one hand, but on the other, you could not ever possibly be aware of, just in unfathomable ways. So thank you.
My goodness, the goosebumps that you just created in me. I find that I'm starting to get more of those comments as I'm doing the deeper inner work, because I think if we could shed off the mind that is not us, our natural, authentic vibration is very healing to others. And potentially that's what I experience every time you and I have a conversation.
Dude. And it's just, and it becomes, it's reciprocated because you said you feel that and you start talking and all of a sudden I get this just woof, thrill bumps through the whole body. And you're absolutely right. It's like a dimmer switch. It's like a dimmer switch. It's like that light is always there and it's on. It's just at a very low level. And you're right. When you get out yourself out of the way, this false self out of the way, as you described so beautifully, it's like turning up the down that dimmer switch and eventually becomes so bright. You don't really need to go and work so hard to get people interested in you, to like you to, you just show up or you just stand there shining like a lighthouse and people come to you. They find you. And that is certainly the case with you. You could feel it every time I've connected with you. And it's been years now. But every time I connect with you, it feels like that dimmer switch gets brighter and brighter just when I think it can't get any brighter at all. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Much, much received, brother. And thank you for being a part of the Thrive State Summit.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.